Hello and welcome to episode number 440 of the Armen Show podcast, recorded just me, no guests on this one, doing an end of year follow-up of all the talks we've had from the beginning to the end. I'm doing this straightforward with absolutely no preparation, which is the style I like to take part in. Sometimes, not always though. We covered a lot of episodes, we covered a lot of ground, we talked to a lot of people, and I will be pulling them up on my phone and sometimes looking at myself just to make sure this is visible. But let's go through the talks we've had this year. A lot of great guests. I hope you enjoyed the talks. We were in the 400s as far as episodes. And let's get into it. The first episode we had this year, number 417, was with Corinne Lang, attorney. She had been on before one time. She said she was going to do travels, and then we talked about her actual travels, legal experience, how she was working on a case against the church in Los Angeles. Later on, I checked up with her. She was part of a very big case through her legal partnership against the church, and there was a huge settlement that was come to as an agreement. So that did happen. That's a follow-up to episode 417 and our previous episode. She had been to many places in South America, took us through the countries, the value of travel. Going places really opens up your thoughts and mind. I have been to some places at this point. It is very beneficial to get clarity, think about things, realize what you like, what you are like when you go into a new place. You'll find out what your habits are, who you gravitate towards. Do you take a lot of risks? Do you not take risks? All kinds of things like that. And so I was part of that in a few different locations. I'm sure you may have been as well. And it's good to do. It's good to do. Long live travel in some form. She went in South America. I've been in parts in Northern America and slightly Europe as well. On episode 418, we had Cecily Treyberg. We talked about beliefs, behaviors, influence, and resistance to persuasion, which is an important category. How much can you prevent yourself from being persuaded towards something that's not really you? Can you prevent against that? Are you persuaded a lot by online media that did not have to be the case? Could you have avoided that in some way? Do you have clarity of mind such that when something shows up, you're able to have a strong internal perspective, and then the media can't really impact you heavily? It might have some impact, but you don't want every piece of media to throw you off, as it might be. Strength of internal character is important moving forward. I may include some life lessons in this talk from 2024, a wonderful year. That is Cecily, and she is at the University of Cambridge. I always like to describe where people are, how they made their path through, because then later you may reconnect with them. You might find out why they got where they got to. It gives a whole story versus if you just know maybe some information they're sharing. Why are they wanting to share that? What thoughts caused that? Glad to use this camera, by the way. The last time I used it was on the episode in person with Kat, which is a more recent one I will talk about later in this discussion. On 419, that was a cool episode. We did that in San Francisco with Rob Henderson, who has taken over the year. That was at the beginning of the year. He has been all over the place throughout this year, talking about his book, Troubled, his youth in foster care, going from this home to that home, how things were not great, how he made his way out of that. And now, Dr. Rob Henderson, he is and is connected to, I believe, Cambridge as well, and has given many talks across podcasts at Oxford University, I believe, everywhere, articles. Rob has done a lot, and he has talked a lot about luxury beliefs social class and how people will present something to keep people at a certain level in life. So they're at this level up here. They will say things to people down here to keep them down here in a way that still sounds good. Luxury beliefs are ones that affect those down here and then don't actually affect those who are in that position. There's a better way to word it, but they are not positive to those of a lower status and are able to maintain those of higher status in their position. It's a bit of trickery in the background. Rob is wonderful, and we are both of a similar personality type from what I have figured out. So that is substantial. On episode 420, we had Bo Weingard. Bo, a challenging individual. He will challenge things, analyze things. We talked about psychology, social status, human variation, and more. Bo got his social psychology degree from Florida State. We talked about human evolution. I liked how he has a bit of counterforce like myself, so it was a joyful discussion. I like people that have a counterpunch kind of nature. They don't take things at face value. They challenge a bit. He has a lot of peer-reviewed publications. Talks about human nature. Well, there's a couple of things I did like about him. One is I had seen him many times in past tweets or articles, and other people had mentioned him. And Corey Clark, I believe, had mentioned him, or they had worked together in some way, and a couple of other past guests as well. So that I like when people interconnect with past guests. That's always cool to me because the story continues to build. I'm fond of that. We talked about intellectual honesty, which Corey Clark is also big on. The scientific community putting out material that's intellectually honest and not trying to make a point or have an agenda in their research, but have it be what science or research is actually showing. Quite vital, I would say. We talked about incentives, which I've also talked about with Jana Gallus before at UCLA. The incentives you set up in a system will highly impact what people will do, regardless of what you tell people they should do, because what they will get out of their effort is the big deal. And so, if the incentives are in the right track, everything else follows. If the incentives are not on the right track, but you say you should do this and you should do this, you will be disappointed because you're saying one thing, but rewarding another. It's not going to work well. Nope. That's one thing we talked about with Bo. I had a few in-person episodes this year, now that I think about it. 421, we had Kaylin O'Connor. That was at UC Irvine, which I've done 2 in-person episodes at so far. One was with Nicole Iturriaga. That was wonderful. But Kaylin, on episode 421, we talked about philosophy of science, biology, and game theory. She was great because very specific on looking at science from one layer up, metacognition of science or metascience. How do you have good research? So that's related to what Bo Weingard also talks about and Corey Clark. If you have good research, the things coming out are going to be positive. But if the research itself has a weak base, or people are not challenging what has happened before, the results are nearly, I don't want to say useless. They will be updates, but will they be pushing things forward? Not so much. We talked about critical thinking, which I've talked about on many episodes. If you're using your mind on a regular basis, this life is for you. If you are not, it is most likely for someone else who is using their mind on a regular basis, and they may be supervising those who are not. Critical thinking is a big deal in separating yourself from others in some way. You're still with people. You're not separating from people, but as far as what you're doing or if you're leading the way. And we talked about philosophy of science. So a lot of meta topics in this episode with Kaylin. She is cool, and her husband are both professors at UC Irvine. I thought that was very interesting. On episode 422, we had Bianca Bosker, who wrote Get the Picture. Notice a few of the people I mentioned earlier were not authors. Rob Henderson is. But I had some authors this year, but not all. This one was Get the Picture, about visual literacy. Visual literacy. Having a sense of art, kind of like having a sense of books. So I may have book literacy, but we talked about visual and artistic literacy, which was very cool. She talked about her journey into the world of art, the art world not fitting in, how she started to become more in art galleries, the art world. She even worked as a security guard at the Guggenheim. Slowing down and seeing things, a very important topic from that one. When you're looking at something, you want to slow down, take it in, see it, and really see it. A lot of things in life, I heard this a few days ago. You see it, but you don't really see it the first time around. So you want to slow down, take a look at it, see what's happening, absorb it, maybe let your feelings come to a calm place until you are really seeing what's in front of you. Until then, are you? Maybe not. And then ask other people what their opinion was. Try to look at it at a different time, different day. If it's actually art, you could look at it from different angles. If it's literary work, you might want to reread it, take notes, find somebody else's opinion on it. A lot of things you can do to examine something in more detail so you can see it more clearly. Talked about art and beauty as well, which is a big part of art. Finding beauty. That's Bianca, and that was episode 422. On episode 423, that was just me. I was talking about the marathon that I did, the LA Marathon, how cool it was, some takeaways I got from running it. I thought that was neat. It was a big deal. I still run in that shirt. The marathon is a cool thing, and it's nice to have done. It doesn't change everything, but it's neat and gives you perspective on your ability, what that looks like in comparison to others, what you're capable of. It makes other things that you would do look easier in comparison. Let's say it's less running than that. So that's pretty cool. That was earlier in the year. On episode 424, this was with Shan and Mariam, democratizing good health. They have Tumos Care, which is an online health platform where it would track your details and you can keep a record of all your health, all your biomarkers, and once it's in the system, you can continue to update it and you are following your health as a person. It would help for when you go to see a doctor, you have more of your details maintained. You know your levels of this and this and this. And if anything gets out of order, you have a strong sense of it early on. And it would give you artificial intelligence tips for what to do with your health. So a lot is covered right there. Wonderful duo, and they've both been on the show before, Shan and Mario. 425, another episode, wonderful one. That was in person. That was with Indre Viscontas, neuroscientist and opera singer, musician. We talked about the bridge between neuroscience and art and how they're connected, and they are connected. I love when people connect different fields, as I've mentioned before, like at the Santa Fe Institute, where it's multidisciplinary and connects this and this and this, economics and physics and philosophy and science. I've always been fond of that. This was an in-person talk with Indre, and we did talk a bit about neuroscience. We mentioned artificial intelligence, which is, I think, 2025 is going to be heavy on artificial intelligence usage by the public and robotic usage by the public. Those two, I think, will spring straight upwards in this coming year. We talked about ways to use neuroscience to understand how the mind processes music. Music does light up our mind in some way. I listen to quite a bit, and I'm sure many of you do as well. It can really expand your thinking. And if you switch up your music every once in a while, it's like switching up your life every once in a while. So I recommend that. Once in a while, alter your playlists, change the songs, try new songs, and it is good for thought. That was also in San Francisco. Episode 426, I had Scott H. Young on the show. He's been on before about learning. He was once again back on for Get Better at Anything, his new book. He always talks about learning, the best ways to do it. I've known him since early, maybe 2009, when we were writing articles on our websites. It was very cool to have him back on. He is in Canada. He gives a lot of tips for getting better at any sort of thing. So it doesn't just have to be one item. It could be a variety of them. Exposing yourself to something. Try to succeed about 80% of the time. You don't need to be 100% perfect on something. Stay sharp, something I like to do. Any category you're looking to take part in. Once you get into it, stay sharp and you'll be in it. It's good to be in something when you want to be doing well at it. I like to be in something, always important to me. Creation versus consumption, I've talked about this many times. Try to stay on the creation end. I'm currently creating as I'm talking to you. Consumption is cool, but there's way less to it of you. This is a lot of me right now as I'm creating this, and I'm speaking and I'm recording and using this camera in a different way, or describing the year of 2024. That's creation. Only I can do that in my own way. But consumption, anybody can do that for a variety of videos and audio. So if everybody can do it, it's not specific to you. But creation is specific to you. Try to stay there at times. It's good for health. Long live creation. On 427, long live these episodes. This year I had so many wonderful guests. On episode 427, we had Kyla Scanlon. She is an economist. Well, she is a finance informer for the online individuals. She brings financial knowledge quite a bit to Gen Z and everyone else in easy to take in videos, clips, all on many platforms, doing well on all the platforms, which is very uncommon. I don't usually see that. Makes it easy to understand financial concepts. And when you understand financial concepts, 10 years later, you're not surprised how things went. But if you don't, 10 years later, you're in the same place as you were 10 years before. So it's quite worth getting a sense of inflation and compound interest and where money goes. Talking about these things or following them, the sense of it will give you a boost in life. And then if you go into more detail, obviously, you can become advanced at compounding or whatever it may be. Kyle is very friendly and makes complex concepts easier to take in as she teaches people in a joyful way. There's some joy there. On episode 428, we had Amarina Kingdom talking about the underwater sounds of fish. She had a book, Sing Like Fish. And how cool is that? Because I have talked about fishing before with California Surf Fishing's Gary Kazazian and Casper Kazazian. But in this case, this is about the sounds that fish make underwater from her book. She talked about how sound travels differently underwater than in air, how our sounds affect their life. Some boats and machinery can really affect how fish have children or get to where they need to be. So we don't want to make sounds too loud or too deep in tone and they analyze which sounds affect which fish. That's part of research in the water. And then how corporations can improve sounds or what's being done around the oceans for marine life. That's what we spoke about in that talk about Sing Like Fish. On episode 429, we talked with neuroscientist Camilla Nord. Wonderful. She has the book, The Balanced Brain, Neuroscience and Mental Health, the top topic of the past 10 years or so, one of the top topics. But she is also at University of Cambridge. It would be good for me to go to that location at some point. Maybe we'll do that at some later time. We talked about mental health, neuroscience, mental well-being, neuroplasticity, how much you can change your mind over time, which we can. Over time, you can definitely change bits of how you're thinking with a lot of effort. I don't think change comes easy as far as the mind, but if you do put in quite a bit of effort, you can make light changes to how you have some memory of something, how you process something, what you're able to take in, how much focus you can have. Not big changes. I don't think we change that much in this way, but small changes definitely are applicable. Embracing neurodiversity and autism. It's worth looking at. We have quite a bit of this at this time and looking into what does it mean for society, how many people have altered mind states. Are there ways that they can also join into society in a better way? Important to look at. Mentally healthy lifestyle, we also talked about that, which is related to what I said earlier about keeping sharp. You can keep sharp in a category, but you can also keep sharp as a person. Both of those. On episode 430, we had a past guest return back, Bronwyn Williams of South Africa. Wonderful. We got to talk about her book, Rescuing Our Republic, which is about South Africa. It was nice to talk to her about her area in that way. She knows quite a bit about her local region, politics, economics, and society. And we talked about the challenges that are unique to South Africa. It was pretty different from here. It is not the same kind of lifestyle. There's different issues with their infrastructure. Sometimes electricity will go out, or internet, other items would go out more commonly than here. They have different issues than we have potentially here in the United States or California. So it's a different world. Property ownership, they have different property ownership rights or challenges than we have here. It's something neat to realize that there's a completely different ecosystem happening somewhere else, aka South Africa. Bronwyn in the building. On episode 431, we had another podcaster on the show, Gwendolyn Dolsky. She has the Good is in the Details podcast, and we talked about her show, philosophy. She has a co-host. It's good to talk to other people that have created a lot because you have a sense of each other. Creator meets creator. It's pretty relatable, and it's that world of creation over consumption. And if you join with other creators, it motivates you to do more of that. But if you're with other consumers, it may motivate you to do more of that. So it's worth being with the people who you want to be more like. We talked about challenging assumptions. If there's something in your life that has been stuck in a way, it's up to you to challenge it one day and say, why is that happening? Why am I a part of this? Why is that there? Who is that? What are they about? How is this affecting me? Questioning things if you seem stuck or feel stuck in some way, and then you can find a path out or through that. Overcoming the absurd. We talked about Albert Camus, the great absurdist. Wonderful individual. And absurdism is something I've always enjoyed. A lot of life is absurd, and we don't want to look at things too seriously if they're not. If they're not too serious, why would we look at them that way? That's not the way to do things. And one other topic we talked about was happiness through activity. A lot of the joy you get in life is through doing. Like right now, this is good, and I'm speaking to you, and this is activity. But if I didn't do this, and then 3 weeks later I was thinking, darn, I wish I had made an end-of-year episode. The activity wasn't there. The joy related to that wasn't there. There's a lot of pieces missing. And it doesn't have that whole... It doesn't cover the whole thing. You're missing pieces. And we don't need to miss pieces. There's not really a reason we need to miss pieces in life. That was episode 431. Episode 432, we brought back on the idea of having multiple people on an episode. We had Dr. Emmerin Meyer and Dr. Amanda Doubleday both on the episode. This was a group episode, and it was neat to have both. We talked about the mind-gut-immune connection, and it was great to have both doctors in place such that some parts of the discussion were between them about specific elements of the gut-mind connection, and also Dr. Amanda Doubleday's surgery and experience in that surgery experience. And Dr. Emmerin Meyer also has medical experience, obviously. And so having the grouping, I thought, was very wonderful for everybody and quite informative. So I will look to bring more panel episodes when possible to bring people together, because that is one of the special things that we could do. And if we have the opportunity and there's good interconnection, to me that's a big positive. So, enjoyable one. Our gut is very important to our health. Gut bacteria, probiotics, what we eat, that connection to our mind, it affects our mood. Understanding that is a big deal, because sometimes people will feel not good, and it is related to not something bad happening in their existence, but not great things happening in their gut or stomach or a food they ate, and it's affecting how you are feeling about something. Pretty substantial. That was episode 432. Moving along, episode 433. This was solid. Sophie Scott Brown, the anarchist. We talked about anarchy, nonconformism. This was a popular episode with many viewers in the clips. There's a lot of commentary on some of the topics that were brought up here. I wouldn't say controversial, but informative. We talked about how she got into anarchy, if hierarchy is required for society to function. How can people build their own agency? Agency is very important. In 2025, you want to take more agency, make more decisions that are based on you, planning things out such that your day is run in ways that make sense to you. The more agency you build, the more the next day you have previous agency you've already built. You're getting more strength and internal fortitude. After many months of this, you're walking much more full as a person as compared to before, because a lot of it is you versus what's happening to you, which lacks agency. If things are always happening to you and you're not happening outward, you will feel weak and not as likely to make decisions or make moves in some way. Wonderful episode there with Sophie Scott Brown. It'd be great to have her on back in the future. On episode 434, we had Michael Orkin, The Science of Luck and Skill in the Story of Chance. We talked about chance, probability. We got to talk about mathematics, which I don't usually get to talk about. An important topic of interest, luck and skill games. When you take chances, you want to know what the percentages are for what you're doing. If it's a low percentage and you're still doing it, expecting a higher percentage result, a lot of people do that. And we call that delusion, or you're not understanding what you're directly dealing with. That's not the way to go. No. Talked a bit about probability. Insurance. Insurance is based on probabilities. And his book. That's Dr. Michael Orkin. On episode 435, the one I mentioned earlier, that was in person with Kat Faraway, actress. She's been on. That was her third time. We talked about her recent experience in film the last few years, roles she's been in, collaborations with people, and finding meaning through art, which is kind of like what Bianca Bosker was talking about, seeing art and finding meaning in it. Art is something to really take into account if you are able to. Very enjoyable episode. A lot of fun parts there. There was a lot of fun parts in that talk. There was some singing. There was some rapping. There was some stories. I brought some of my stories of maybe from a travel and some of her film experiences. We did some accents as well. That's enjoyable. And we talked about a few life topics. Hierarchy, we brought that back. I did a few where I brought back topics from a past guest, like Sophie Scott Brown, on hierarchy and anarchy. So I asked about if hierarchy was necessary the same way in acting on a film set. So I'll try to do more of that, where I connect a past guest's material or topics with a new guest's career or life or what we're talking about, because the interconnection can be very interesting. We also talked about gut feeling, somewhat connected to the gut bacteria, but not directly. And so a bit of linkage to the gut. That gut feeling is a big deal. And when you listen to that gut feeling in life, often you will be glad. And if you skip it, well, what was the point of it being there? Some might say. Great episode, third time with Kat there. On episode 436, we had Robert Talisse, The Key to Democratic Engagement in Civic Solitude. So this was cool because it was about civic solitude, being a civic individual, but of your own accord. So thinking to yourself about, how am I going to be a democratic individual in my country? What am I able to do? Being introverted or thoughtful with yourself, what are ways that I can be a good citizen, good Samaritan, engage with people better? It doesn't always have to be publicly pronounced what you're going to do to be a strong citizen. You can do things behind the scenes, and if you do it in a good way, maybe people won't even know all the thinking or effort you put in, but you come out better helping your city or your neighborhood or your county or a local work environment based on something you're doing regularly, but you don't have to announce it loudly. It could be something quietly that you do to help. And sometimes social media is not helpful in this way because the individual will announce so much of what they're doing, but they're not doing much. So they're presenting something, but underneath there's a lack of effort. And then somebody else might be putting in way more effort, and you don't see it online because they didn't post about it. So the main part is not the showing, but is the doing or being, what you cause upon the world. On episode 437, we only have 3 to go. We had Aziz Rana. We talked about the Constitution in his book, The Constitutional Bind. Huge book, by the way. And I saw it and I thought, wow, that was a huge book. I'm going to take a look at it. And that's when I talked to Aziz, whose name is kind of similar to Azra Raza, but different. His is Aziz Rana, so slightly different. But we talked about the Constitution and how strong it is to last today, any issues with it, and if it is able to handle difficulty in some way, or if it's brittle, if it has ways that it'll break down in some form because of how society is currently. And if it will do that, then it needs to be adjusted. But it takes a lot to adjust the Constitution, and it has worked well for a long time. But it's good that there are people analyzing it in detail over time. We need people to check on things, kind of like Wikipedia or any sort of rule set or information set. You want people checking on it on a regular basis so it stays strong. Kind of like when people check out a bridge to make sure it stays strong. For cars and boats, transportation. On episode 438, we had Vince Beiser. We talked about the geopolitics of metal resources in power metal. We talked about all the metals you need for devices like this, laptops, rechargeable batteries in cars, and if those are running out, which metals are important, lithium, cobalt, all these various metals, how much do we have of them around the world? Are they dangerous to mine? Are they not? Are some countries going to be in an advantage in the next 5 years? China has some advantages in the mineral department. And so that is what compares countries in some way, because this conflict leads to one country having an excess of something, and then now we can produce more of this, and then you don't have a chance to compete with them because they are going to have cheaper whatever it is, or more of that, and then anybody else is out. Competitively, that is. Competitively. And that was the second time that Vince was on the show. It's always nice to have people on a second time or a third time, because there's a bigger story than a one-time showing. And lastly, recently we had Dr. Azra Raza back on the show, I think for her third time. And we talked about her early detection for cancer treatment research and product she has been looking to put out, and has connected with many other doctors to do so, including a few I've had on the show before. And it's nice to see that joint effort to write a grant to get funding for that kind of research, so that cells can be detected early on that are cancerous, and the cancer can be stopped very early. This is what we want to do. Recently, I talked with somebody because I knew someone many years ago who did not stop their cancer early and went into homeopathic type of remedies for many years until it was way too late, and now they are gone. So finding cancer early, like this description that we had in the talk with Dr. Azra Raza, is a big deal, because you don't get to stage 4, you don't get to stage 3. It could be stopped before stage 2 when it's just a larger cell of some sort. And cancer cells are usually much larger. So you would cut off the growth early on, and now you don't get to that future item. So early detection may not be as profitable in the larger scale for companies, but for the average person, if that was implemented, it could prevent huge issues down the line. Before you even know, there would be huge issues. That was very cool to have Azra back on the show. So that was the talks we did this year. We made some cool changes to looks of things related to the show. A lot of clips all over the place. A lot of commentary on the clips all over the place, so I like the commentary. A lot of lessons learned, people communicated with, opportunities for future talks that come to mind, and a good continuance of the show in 2024 as we go towards 2025. Nice progression. It's nice to see progression. And it's good to be in the 400s, well into the 400s now. This is episode 440. It gives it a structure. It gives it a base. And it's nice to have a base of something. I hope you're enjoying the general set of content, learning from it in some way, maybe meeting some people through the talks that you otherwise might not have. And I'm glad to participate in that. And always trying new things. This is with this camera, sometimes in person, sometimes online, new clips, different resolutions, whatever it might be. So as long as we keep trying and doing and making, what kind of cool things can come out of it? Hope you're enjoying it. The Armen Show with your host, Armen Shirvanian. And that is that for 2024 as we make our way forward.